Welcome to radio.com on this Wednesday afternoon. We'll be joined on the fan at 6 o'clock this evening as we get closer to the Super Bowl, and everyone now zeroes in on that, starts to at least put a little bit of the Kobe Bryant tragedy behind us as we look towards the weekend. There's obviously a lot more that's going to happen there in terms of ceremonies and a lot of mourning that has to be done, especially in the Los Angeles area. The NFL lost one of its stars last night, Chris Dolman, who was a really terrific player. If you're not old enough to remember him, a generation ago, passed away at the age of 58. One of the premier defensive ends of that era. Surefire Hall of Famer, pass rusher, very, very talented player, very consistent player, 8-time Pro Bowler. Had 150 sacks in his career, at 22 in a season. Known mostly for his work with the Vikings. Had fought for a while with a battle with cancer, had brain cancer, and passed away at the age of 58. So way too early. Again, now does the game, do the hits to the head, do we find CTE in this case again if they do autopsies? Is this part of the same issue? I don't know. We know that people who don't play football can get brain cancer, so I don't know that this is a cause of the game he played or not. I don't know. Maybe we'll find that out. But again, a lot of players who play a long time have shortened lives in the NFL, and he's gone at the age of 58, which is way, way too early. You're seeing a lot of stuff about this matchup in terms of, obviously the youth of the two teams, the exuberance of the two teams, the young quarterbacks and where they are in their careers. So many of the tight ends and their stardom. Also, you're hearing about the collective speed of the two squads. They might be the fastest squads. The Chiefs are clearly on offense the fastest offense we've ever seen. Are the Niners? Do they have? They do have a lot of speed on their defensive side of the ball. They have plenty of speed on offense. They have speed at running back. They have speed at wide receiver. So you are talking about some very, very quick players, and especially on the Chiefs side. But there's one that clearly stands out. I made the point this morning that back in 1968, I went to Yankee Stadium. I had gone once to Yankee Stadium I had gone there many times for baseball, but I'd only gone there twice in my life for football. We couldn't afford football seats. I didn't have a dad, so I didn't have anyone take me to the game. So I got to go with friends when I was in second grade, and I saw Jim Brown play. He had a great game, but I can tell you honestly, I wasn't ready for the game or to be able to tell you about all the wonderful things he did. I went back in 1968. And I sat in the bleachers, the old stadium bleachers, for the football. And it was late in the season. The Giants were mediocre, and the Cowboys were really good. It was the Craig Morton Cowboys. But they were on their way to a 12-win season. They were a wonderful team. They were just beginning their run of that 15-year dynasty that they had, that I know only produced 2 Super Bowls, but again, had many, many moments and lost many heartbreaking games, either in the Super Bowl or to the Lombardi Packers. But that day, Bob Hayes scored 2 touchdowns. And I was fascinated by Hayes because I had never seen anybody play that fast. So Hayes became a little bit of a fascination of mine. I read up on him. I remember going to the library in high school and going up and reading about him. He had been obviously a world-class sprinter. He was the world's fastest human. He was a great track star who became a football player. And he wasn't one of these guys who was just not a football player. He was also a football player. He did not have the greatest hands in the world. He did not love playing in cold weather, but he was lethal. And he had some highly productive seasons and became a Hall of Famer. I bring that up because he played in a Super Bowl in Miami. That was the game that Landry made the mistake of playing Craig Morton, and they lost to the Colts in the sloppiest Super Bowl ever played. The Doomsday defense should have carried the day. It was brilliant that year and was brilliant in that game, except the Cowboys just kept turning the ball over. The next year he went to Roger, and they dominated the Dolphins 24-3 in the Super Bowl. Bob Hayes played in both those Super Bowls. The first one was played in Miami, as a matter of fact. The next one was played down in Texas, in Rice Stadium. So 50 years later, there will be a player who will get that kind of attention and who people call the fastest player to ever play in the NFL. Now, I'm not sure, and I don't know this statistically, that Tyreek Hill is faster than Bob Hayes. He did not have Bob Hayes' track career. He had a track career, but not Bob Hayes' track career. What I say that's different about the two is the difference in the game. Hayes returned punts. Hayes they'd throw a little hitch to him, and he would try and get clear and just zoom down the sideline, or they'd throw the long ball to him, obviously, and he'd obviously run under these long balls and just be gone. He was a straight line guy, which is blazing straight line speed. Hill is a guy that has, I think, modernized this. He will beat you horizontally. He will carry the ball. We know he's even thrown the ball. Andy likes to fool with that stuff with him. But he'll run the ball, as you've seen him do even in the playoffs this year. He will explode in a short amount of space and just electrify with and I think in that space and moving laterally, moving horizontally, and Andy will stretch a defense horizontally enormously in these games, not just vertically, but horizontally. And I think in that regard, he's the fastest player in those small confined spaces that I've ever seen in the history of the league. And I think he's the most lethal speed we have seen on a football field since Bob Hayes graced it those 50 years ago. And I think he brings that into this game where you can talk and do lip service to everybody who plays on that offense. You can talk about what Kelsey does and how acrobatic he is and how great his hands are and how good his routes are underneath and how good he is in the red zone, and et cetera, and so on. You can talk about the secondary receivers. You can talk about when they line up all their speed. And we know how much they have throughout their entire lineup. But Hill is different. Hill has to be respected. He has to be honored. He has to be accounted for on every single down. If Mahomes comes to the line of scrimmage and he sees that he has man-to-man on Hill, the ball is going to him. He will, if he doesn't have help over the top for one play, he will go there. One play. I don't care who you think can cover him. Nobody can. And nobody should try and do it man-to-man, because if you do now, we know the Niners are going to mix up their coverage. We know they're going to play plenty of zone. We understand what they're going to do, okay? But nobody is going to, in any way, in any configuration, wind up with him man-to-man, because if you do, if you have him single, he is going to beat you. You cannot even, for a second, drop your guard against him. That's how fast he is. I saw him play in person once since he's been in Kansas City, and he got behind the defense that day at least 6 or 7 times. And Alex Smith couldn't get him the ball, which is why they went out and found, despite the fact they were very productive, went out and found a quarterback who could reach these guys, especially him. And Mahomes can reach him from anywhere on the field. And that combination is a scary a scary quotient that they bring into this game. Because Mahomes has got a incredible throwing arm. We know that. His father was a guy who threw the ball in the high 90s. We know the kind of arm Mahomes has. It's legendary. They'll talk about the fact that he can throw the football 100 yards. I don't know if he actually can, but you know what? If he can come close, that's far enough. We know he has a prodigious arm. We know he can make incredible throws on the run, and he has a guy who can separate and get across the field and get past defenders at such an incredibly quick rate. And you don't appreciate that on television because you don't see it a lot of times in the play. If you see him in the game, if you're actually at the game, you will be shocked how many times he gets behind people and how many times he can be open. Mahomes throws to open receivers with this Kansas City group so much more. I think the statistic was 7% more than any other quarterback in the sport. He had open receivers, meaning what they classify as an open receiver is 3 yards in the clear. They're open 47% of the time, which is astounding. And they have legitimate speed everywhere, but they have a guy in Hill who is a stone game breaker. Make a mistake, miss a tackle, miss an assignment, and it's 6 points. That's how fast he is. Is he capable of dropping the ball? Oh, yeah. Is he capable of muffing a punt? We've seen it. Oh, we've seen him drop the ball? Yes. Is he a guy you can knock around? Absolutely. Has he had shoulder issues? Yep. Is he going to take a lot of physical punishment? Nope. He's a little bit of a thing. And we know in his career he hasn't been one of nature's noblemen, although everyone says he's behaved this year, so we'll give him the benefit of the doubt for the moment. But as far as what he brings to the game, he brings a quality, an explosiveness that we have not seen in a big receiver since the days of Baves. Now, there have been plenty of explosive receivers, and there are, Beckham, when he came in the league, was an incredibly explosive receiver and a gifted receiver. But we're talking about a level of speed here where it's just scary speed. The acceleration rate is just so quick. It's they like to go now talk about how these guys run 21 miles an hour this year, and how many times it was Kansas City receivers who actually maxed out at over. That seems to be the number they come up with. And again, these new numbers they come up with, they're hard to put into football terms, because when you hear a number like that, you're like, okay, what does it actually mean to the football game when you're thinking about it in terms of separation, or thinking about it in terms of anything. You don't really put it in perspective. But the few times in the league this year that somebody had actually run at that speed, how many times it was a Chief was surprising. That's the thing that's just jumped out at you, is that so many times this year the guy who reached that max speed was actually a Kansas City Chief. And Hill can do it where they've actually shown him he can do it in 5 and 10 second spurts in confined areas where it's unbelievable. Like here, Hardman, Week 10, 21.87. His sustained speed was 21. He reached 21.87. His sustained speed was 21.46, and he gained 63 yards on the play. He then had a play when he again reached over 21 and went 83 yards. Beckham had a play where he went 21.7. His sustained speed was 21.31, and he went 89 yards. Deshaun Jackson, who we know is an incredibly fast player. And then Hill had a bunch of them, 21.27, 21.23, 21.33. Sammy Watkins had one at 21.33. So they have 3 guys in this list that only had Hill, Watkins, Jackson, Beckham, and Hardman, 3 of the 5 are Chiefs. Sammy Watkins actually reached that speed. Hill can reach that speed all the time, and he can actually reach a higher speed in a confined area, where they actually confined him into 5 and 10 yard areas where he reached such a velocity level that no one else had been able to chart. So his movement in those kinds of numbers is just unbelievable. And he has, an ability to be shifty, which when you can do that at that speed, where it's not just straight line stuff, when you can add a shiftiness to that, and then hold on to the ball, which, listen, Hill doesn't always, that's too much to ask. He doesn't always hold on to the ball. Just like we know Deshaun Jackson doesn't always hold on to the ball. Just like we know Beckham doesn't always hold on to the ball. These guys who run that fast, a lot of times they do have a habit of dropping the ball. If they caught it every time and they had hands like, some wide receivers, well, that would be a lethal package. That would be hard. But these guys can break the game open. And if you go in there and you start, every coach goes in, any defensive coach you've ever talked to will tell you the thing they fear is speed. The old adage, luck follows speed, speed kills, whatever, okay? That's what it is. You know that when Mahomes needs to get a first down, he's going to look for his tight end, who's an acrobatic player and who has great hands, despite the fact we have seen him actually drop the ball a couple times. And we've seen every Chief drop the ball in the playoffs because they've started so poorly in these games. They've dropped a lot of passes. But he's going to look for his tight end in those plays. But the way they can stretch the field and the way they can utilize this speed with a quarterback that can reach them from anywhere, it makes it a field that you have to cover. And it does put a lot of pressure on the San Francisco defense, because any defense that plays them, which is what makes them such an explosive offense, Andy makes it so that you have to cover them horizontally and vertically. It's too much to do. You can't cover all the area. You can't run with them horizontally and run with them vertically. It cannot be done. So he tries to get them in space, and he does a very good job of that. And when they get in space, that's where the big plays come from. And they make an inordinate number of big plays. Matter of fact, they make a lot of big plays. There is likely to score from outside the 30-yard line as they are to score from inside the 30-yard line. That's just the way they're built. I mean, that's just who they are. Now, ironically, the backs on San Francisco are really fast. I mean, they have, Breida's a guy who has a tremendous amount of speed. Mostert's a guy who's got a lot of speed. I mean, really very fast players. Now, we don't know how much any one of them is going to get the ball. Last week, we know whose turn it was. And he wound up with 220 yards rushing. Okay? We've seen a lot of these backs hit certain sustained speeds, but Breida was the fastest guy for just a running back in the league this year. He actually was faster than McCaffrey, faster than Chubb, faster even than Barkley, faster than any of those guys that all hit that list at one time or another. Even Henry got up there over 21 once. He wasn't able to sustain it, but he did get it up there at one point. Even Fournette got it up to 21 once. So sometimes those big guys can get moving and get it all going downhill. But the guys you would expect, like Cook and all the 9 running backs, are on that list. So there is a tremendous amount of speed in this game. Niners have it on defense. They like to boast it. Kansas City, as we know, talks about having the fastest wide receiver group of all time. And then you have the backs in San Francisco, who not only make it very difficult to handle with this zone passing game, zone running game, whether they run in the inside or the outside zone, but they're doing it with backs who, when they hit a hole, they get through it very, very quickly and turn 5 into 25 in a snap of a finger, which is what makes this running attack of theirs, which has been on display in the postseason. I think the thing that people didn't realize about the Niners, and listen, the Niners snuck up on people this year, so a lot of people hadn't seen them a lot. They uh, they didn't realize that this team had a signature running game handed down from father to son that was really part and parcel about what they were and how overpowering that running game has become in the postseason. I mean, let's be honest. They have not had to throw. They stopped throwing the ball against the Vikings because they were running it so successfully, and they never had to never had to throw it against the Packers, which is why Kittle, who was really one of the best offensive players in the league, has not been on display so far, and could be a very big factor in the Super Bowl. He's not been on display so far. If you were watching these playoff games and you heard people raving about how good Kittle was, you'd be like, "Oh, really? I've seen him make some blocks, but I haven't seen much." Well, it's there. You just haven't seen it yet. You haven't had to see it yet. That doesn't mean you won't see a whole lot of it. You might see a whole lot of it in this game. Right from the get-go, you might see a whole lot of it, depending on how Kansas City and Spags decide to attack. But it's there, and it's something that they're very capable with. So you're going to hear, leading up to this game, how not only are you talking about teams with a lot of young talent, whether you're talking about Mahomes, who was on the verge of enormous stardom, or Bosa, who burst into the league as advertised and had just an incredible rookie season. How it was sensational. Or the tight ends who were both, top of the league and have become the 1-2 tight ends in the league now that Gronk is, doing goofy things for Fox. So there's a lot of speed, a lot of talent, a lot of really superior personnel. Garoppolo hasn't gotten a lot of attention. He will these next couple of days. Yes, you're going to hear about how handsome he is, which I'm sure, you don't really care about, but maybe the ladies do. But he is obviously a good-looking kid, Everyone knows that. He's got, he's got GQ kind of looks. We know that. But he's had a very quiet and somewhat erratic postseason. He was erratic in the Minnesota game. He was very quiet in the Green Bay game. And their running game has done the talking for them. And you would expect them to want it to do the talking for him here because it actually helps them in a very big way defensively. But if you're looking at it from a standpoint of what am I taking away, if you're Kansas City, yes, the player you're most worried about is Kittle, but your whole being right now is that we cannot let this San Francisco running game. We cannot let the San Francisco running game dominate us and keep us pinned to the sideline and wear us down and make us become guys who are just catching people on defense and getting pushed all over the field. And they're turning 5s into 10s, into 15s, into 20s. And they got us in, they got us out, and we go take them out, and they move in, they go in, we go out, and they just make us look really foolish. And that can happen. And on the other side, if you're San Francisco, they know they have to deal with Mahomes. They're going to discuss whether they can blitz him, how much they can. Do they have to put a spy on him to deal with his ability to run and break the line of scrimmage, especially in a game this big? You send all the receivers downfield on 3rd and 10, and then he has free lanes to get outside containment and run for first downs and run for 20 and 30 and 40 yards before he's touched because they dragged everybody along. And those are design plays when they do that. And they'll have to answer that. But more than anything else, they don't want Hill to get behind them and kill them. And when you least expect it, if you think you can sneak a coverage by them where you didn't give them the right respect, or you didn't shade the second player to him, or you didn't make sure you dotted the I's and crossed the T's when it came to your coverage for him, they will make you pay every time because that's rule number one for them. If it's there, we're taking it. Same thing Eli did with Beckham in his first couple of years. There would be 8, 9 plays they'd have the safety over the top, safety over the top. When they came to the line of scrimmage, the safety wasn't over the top. Boom, Eli was going to Beckham. Was going to Odell every single time. It was a cardinal rule. Same rules in effect here. So they know that. There's not much that will get by these teams here in the 2 weeks. It gives you a lot of time to really self-scout. It gives you a lot of time to look at everything that these teams have done. And with the equipment they have now, you can really catalog and look at everything in such quick fashion. You have such ability now to orderly look at everything. So if you want to look at every, I want to look at everything they ran between 3rd and 10 and 3rd and 15 this year. Boom. I can watch every play right in succession. And I want to see every play they ran on 3rd, between 3rd and 7 and 3rd and 12 in this personnel. Boom. It's right there. Used to take assistants, the guys who were the offensive quality control and defensive quality control, and the guys who were starting to, just get into the sport as coaches and didn't have any authority yet and were just kind of learning, the grunts. They used to spend all their time doing cut-ups. Now, with the technology they have, you don't have to do that stuff anymore. You have computers that do everything for you. So it does open up a lot more time to analysis. And the analysis they can do on each other now is so overwhelming that they can break it into, what position of the field, what matchup, what, defense we were in, what player we want to highlight in that defense, what matchup we want to highlight. I mean, any way you want to look at it, you can look at it. So there's no surprises from that standpoint. But it takes me back to what Bob Hayes brought to the game and what this kid, they always talked about it, wearing number 22. Bullet Bob Hayes for the Dallas Cowboys, and always the world's fastest human. And now you got a guy who, I don't know, he might not be the world's fastest human, but he's the world's fastest football player, and he will be on display on Sunday. And he has to be contained. Otherwise, it can be a long afternoon. Back after this. Looks like Dusty Baker is going to be the manager of the Astros. A veteran guy there makes sense. If you want someone who can kind of heal whatever wounds have to be healed and can put a professional face on things, I think it makes sense. I mean, they're still a talented team. They're going to go through a lot this year. I don't know how, it's hard to say how that's going to impact that squad. I haven't really given it a lot of thought, nor do I really care, to be honest with you. But it did make sense to put a veteran manager in there. It does make sense. And whether it was going to be any of the veteran guys that were available, Dusty is as good a choice as you really can make. He's a guy who can handle those situations, handles them really well. Okay, he's very good. He's very good at putting I don't want to say a happy face, but he can handle players. He is very well liked. He's become one of the real, elder statesmen in the sport. You got to realize Dusty's 70 years old. He's been around forever as a player, as a very well liked, very popular player, and as a manager who has been around a long time and knows his way around handling the controversy. He can handle. There's no situation he can't make better. So from that standpoint, I agree. There's not anybody that would have made more sense. You could put other veteran guys in there who I think could do a good job too, but I don't think anybody could have been a wiser choice than Dusty Baker to heal some of the wounds and just get them past this time for those guys and those players, because this is not going to be something that is going to be 2 days in spring training and over with. They're going to hear about it everywhere they go this year. They're going to get asked about it everywhere they go. And when they go into the towns where it's sensitive, like here, all right, or anywhere else along the way, then they're going to get their feet held to the fire. And his job is going to be to get it back to baseball and get it back to that series and get it back to that game and say, guys, you got what you need. Here's what we'll say about it. Here's what we'll do with it. First day of the series, we'll deal with it. Then let's get back to baseball. He'll know how to handle it. And it'll wear well with him. While with someone else, it might not. So from that standpoint, I think it makes plenty of sense. And I think it's a good choice. I don't think, listen, Dusty's a really good regular season manager. He's just not a great postseason manager. He's had a lot of heartbreaking defeats, and he's been a little. He's just not had the. He has not had the Midas touch as to when is the right time to make that pitching move. And we all go back to, certain games where we know it kind of backfired. But he's had a very distinguished career and a very successful career. It's about winning games. He's won a million of those. So, and he can handle, as we said, any situation. So Dusty Baker, who's been a manager forever, will be a manager again. He'll become the oldest manager in the majors as he takes over the Astros at the age of 70. Goodell made comments about the Rooney Rule and about how he thinks they need to make adjustments to the Rooney Rule. Now, you know what the Rooney Rule is. And every year there's this process where teams go through this ridiculous dance where they'll bring in the same minority candidate in 4 or 5 different places where they have no intention of hiring a guy and let him come through because of the practice of the idea that you must first at least interview a minority candidate before you move on to the guy you want. Has that rule led to more minority hirings? Yeah, I think it has. I think sometimes guys have been put in front of a team that wouldn't have been, and the team fell in love with the guy, like a Mike Tomlin as an example. I disagree with the commissioner here, though. You see, I don't think that it's that the Rooney Rule is not working. I think we've reached a point now when it comes to minority hirings, as far as, I'm just talking about the NFL right now, where I just think we go through ebbs and flows. I would only have a problem if I felt that there were candidates who were really overly qualified, who were being held back. And I don't think that's the case. I think now when there is a good candidate, he gets to where he needs to go. So everyone keeps score. Oh, right now there are 4 minority head coaches in the league, and let's divide it, and that's not enough. Well, that's a silly way to look at it. Whether there's 8 at one time, or there's 4 at one time, or there's 10 at one time, shouldn't matter. What should matter is that if there is a bright young coach who has clearly showed that he has what it takes, and if he's being ignored, if he's being run over by and passed over by guys who are not quality candidates, then there's something wrong. And I don't think that's happening right now. I think it's just a matter of timing. There are certain years where certain people are going to wind up in certain jobs. Okay? Rivera gets fired. They want to make a change in Carolina. He happens to be in a minority. You know he's going to get a job again. A guy like that, whether he was white, whether he was polka dot, whether he was pink, he's going to get another job again. So that guy, to me, that's a no-brainer. It's like when Andy Reid's out. Okay, Andy Reid's out. You know Andy Reid's leaving Philly. You know he's going to get a job in 5 days. So to me, why fool around with those situations? Whether it be someone who's a minority. So let's say next year the Steelers say, you know what? It's time, Mike. We're done with Mike Tomlin. What should we do? Make sure that we go through some kind of protocol with Mike Tomlin? No, Mike Tomlin's going to get hired again if he wants to coach again. He's going to get hired in 2 seconds. And it has nothing to do with being black or white. It has to do with being qualified. So to me, as long as the guys in the league who people know are good are getting opportunities, I think it's working. So Bieniemy didn't get a job this year. That's okay. He can wait another year. Bieniemy's going to get a job. No question he's going to get a job. He just didn't get one this year. That's all. Didn't work out that way. Now, I do think one thing that is it should be worked on, which is unfair. And I don't know the answer because there's not really any way to slow down the teams that aren't in the playoffs. But the teams that are advancing, if you are a coach on those teams, and those guys a lot of times are going to be big candidates, if your team keeps advancing, you actually are hurt as far as being a candidate for the job. You're better off if you are well thought of and your team goes out in the first round of the playoffs. You have a much better chance that year of getting a job than if the team goes to the Super Bowl. Because it's very hard to find time to get to that guy. So I think those guys do get hurt. And if there were a way to deal with that, but how are you going to slow these teams down? These guys now have begun to get rid of the coaches with a couple of weeks left in the regular season so that they can get a head start. Because it allows them to get a head start on anybody who's not in the league, anybody who's in college. So if I were doing this, I would do it the same way. If I was looking and I was like wide open as to who I was going to hire, I would fire the guy with 2 weeks left because I want to be able to get a head start on anybody who's out of the league in case I want to bring somebody in who's broadcasting or somebody in who's out of the league. Or I want to talk to college guys. None of that is restricted. So that gives me a leg up on that stuff. So to me, there's no perfect way to orchestrate this so that you keep the numbers exactly where you want them. See, to me, I find that part offensive. I need a number that has to be reached. Oh, 8 jobs and none of them got filled this year. So, who cares? Maybe next year 4 gets filled by minorities. Who cares? Look at it over a period of years and tell me this. Point to me where the guy who deserves a chance is not getting looked at. Then I'll say we got to fix something. Point to me where that is, where that guy isn't getting elevated, where he's not getting treated right. You know, now we can all talk about who gets second chances. That's always a tricky thing as to who gets second chances to be a head coach and who doesn't. You know, it's an offensive league. It's a quarterback league. So the guys who are offensive guys are always going to have a little bit of a leg up. So the guy who's an offensive guy, for the most part, 9 times out of 10 is going to have a little bit of a leg up. So the guy, when like, I'll give you a perfect example. Okay, if you look at a guy like Bruce Arians, he was going to get a job again as soon as he decided he wanted one, because people in the league had made a decision about him as to the way he coached and what his style was and what he could bring to the table. So if he decided that he was ready to coach, he was going to get a job again, because there was already a thought process out there about what kind of candidate he was. And it's just a question of whether he really, did he want to do it again? Did he want to move his family again? Did he want to live in the cold weather again? Or was that a possibility? Or was he going to wait for a warm weather job and stuff like that? He could be a little picky. And you've had the guys out who have decided not to come back in. Gruden didn't come back in for years. Then he did. Cowher hasn't come back in. I don't think he ever will. So you always have those guys laying and waiting. And that impacts the young candidates too. But when I look at it, if Tomlin got fired, would there be any question he'd get a job again? Absolutely not. If Lynn got fired, do I think somebody would take a flyer on him again? I do. Absolutely do. Romeo is just finished up. They finally said, we're going to make a move there with Romeo. Romeo's been a coordinator on great teams. He's got a drawer full of Super Bowl rings. He wasn't great as a head coach. He was great as a coordinator. He got his chances. He had more than one chance. Didn't distinguish himself just like a Wade Phillips didn't as a head coach, just like a North Turner didn't as a head coach. But those guys can get jobs in the league whenever they want as far as coordinator goes. And coordinators are positions of authority. Not everybody's supposed to be a head coach. So to me, where I'd have a problem is not looking at it and saying, oh, this year all we have is this guy, this guy, this guy, and this guy, not enough minorities. What I say is, are the guys who should be getting a shot. And as long as you continue to give minorities, and it's the same thing now with, there is a female coach at the Super Bowl this year, okay? That's a new novelty. She's got a lot of attention. I made the comment a couple of years ago that got a lot of attention when I talked about the fact that I said I didn't see head coaches in the male sports. And the point I was making was, until you get young women into many, many positions as coaches where there's enough candidates in the pool, you're not going to get head coaches. Unless somebody's just trying to, make a stand. That's what has to happen. It has to become a no-brainer. It has to become commonplace where you have a handful of good, solid minority candidates throughout the league. And how that happens is ex-players stepping into coaching. Now, as players make more money, they don't want to do those jobs because in the beginning, they're grunt jobs. They don't pay a lot of money, and the players, a lot of them are spoiled. And it means going back and putting in a lot of hours and paying your dues, and they don't want to do that because in the NFL, you're not starting as a head coach. Even if you're a player, you're going to have to go be a position coach. Now, you won't have to start as an assistant. You'll be able to start if you're a wide receiver, you could start as the wide receiver coach. Or maybe 1 year you're a quality control coach, and the next year you're the wide receiver coach, depending on who you are. So you're going to get a leg up from there, but you're still going to have to put in those long hours and pay your dues if you want to someday be a head coach. There's a lot that goes into it. And if I see that there's 30 or 40 young women as assistants throughout the league, then eventually you're going to see some head coaches. But if you see just one assistant in the league, like in all of college basketball, there was one female assistant throughout all of Division I basketball. And that's almost 400 schools. Well, that's not working. I mean, there's one young lady who might be, in the position, but that's not working. Same thing. The way you're going to get more black general managers, more minority general managers, more minority head coaches, more black head coaches is to get more assistants and to get more people working in personnel, working in scouting. You have to come up the ranks if you're going to be the general manager, if you're going to be the head coach. You've got to pay your dues. And the more people you put into the positions underneath them, that's where your quality candidates are going to come from. I think it's working. I don't think that's an issue anymore. I don't think there's anywhere in this league where there is an owner who wouldn't hire a minority candidate as a head coach. I do not believe there is I think if you had asked me this question 20 years ago, I would have told you there's places they wouldn't let them be quarterbacks. If you had asked me 30 years ago, I would have told you there are places they wouldn't let them be centers, wouldn't let them be safeties, wouldn't let them be quarterbacks, no less be coaches. It has all changed. Black quarterback isn't even an issue anymore. Years ago, it was an enormous issue. Now it's not even an issue anymore. We don't even talk about it anymore. A minority playing or a black player playing any position now is not even an issue anymore. In the old days, it was. Absolutely. There were biases that had to be knocked down. And they've been knocked down. And I think the same is true of coaching. So I don't even look at it that way anymore. There are going to be years where certain teams are going to hire a specific person. That's their prerogative. But there's also where it's good to put a candidate in front, even if you think it's they're already hiring someone. That's fine. But you know what? What happens is somebody got to meet somebody, and then they say, you know what? I interviewed this young man. I wasn't even thinking about it. And this guy was so impressive. And they tell this one, and they tell this owner, and they tell this owner. Or, yeah, but Mike Tomlin come out of nowhere. And look at the career he's had. So to me, it is working. And you'll go through droughts and you'll go through ebbs and flows. But I don't think there's anywhere in football anymore, in the National Football League. And right now we're just talking about the National Football League. Because in the NBA, it's not an issue at all, as we know. I don't believe there's any place where a qualified candidate is being held back because of his color. I don't believe that anymore. I don't think that's the case. I don't think any owner thinks that way. I think all these owners want to do is win. And they could care less where their head coach comes from or where their general manager comes from. They just want somebody who can do the job. The color they like in the NFL, like in all professional sports, is green. So, again, I don't think that it needs to be reexamined just because you think the number has gotten a little light for a single year, where you just don't think there's enough minority head coaches in a single season. I would not sweat it. I think in that regard, the league has done a very good job. And I think, I always said, it's no longer an issue when it's not a story when the black coach gets fired. And it's not a story anymore when a coach gets fired. Well, you're going to fire a coach. You've seen how many coaches get fired a year out now. 2 years out. We've seen coaches in this town go after a year. We've seen coaches throughout the league go after a year. Teams are impetuous now. They want to win. And they'll do anything to win. And they don't care. Really don't care, I don't believe anymore, what someone's background is. They just want to win games. Back after this. Phoenix Open this week. Every week I always talk about the golf tournaments because I like to pick long shots in the golf tournaments. I look for them. This week you're in Scottsdale. If you've ever been there, I've been to that tournament a couple times. It's crazy. You've seen the scene on TV. You know how wild it is out there. It is like going to. It's like going to a huge college football game. It is like going to Florida, Georgia. You know what I mean? There's people everywhere. There's college kids everywhere. I've been there a couple times on the Saturday. I mean, 50,000 people jammed into that place. I mean, it is wild what goes on there. And you know how raucous they are. You know the whole setting there, the whole thing. I look for my long shot guys that I like to pick. Last week, somebody I didn't do it. I forgot to do it before the tournament started, so I didn't pick one last week. And Leishman came on with a big performance and won. I like horses for courses. And I like long shots. And I'll tell you, Rahm was right there last week. He's got to be able to close. He's got to do better when the tournaments are on the line. He's there a lot. He's just not winning enough tournaments for somebody that talented. I'm going to give you a long shot, real long shot, who's a horse for the course, who has played well there a couple of times. In recent years, I see Spieth's playing this week. I see Bubba Watson's playing this week. Zach Johnson, Finau's playing this week. Fowler, DeChambeau, Snedeker. There's my guy, Reeve, 70-1. He has played well there last couple of years. 70-1. Reeve is my long shot to get into the top five and to win. 71 to win it. And I'm sure a very good price to finish in the top five is probably somewhere around 15, probably about 70-1, probably about 12-1, I would guess. I'll look that one up. But take him for the top five and take him to win it at 70-1. Reeve is my guy this week, so he's my pick, long shot pick for this week's stop. And before you know it, you know what? They'll be heading to Florida. And you know what that means after that? Augusta is not that far away. It comes very quickly. We'll be through the Super Bowl, and then you kind of knocking down the weeks. Next week's Pebble Beach, which I hate. I hate Pro-Ams. And then before you know it, they're at the Honda, and then Arnold Palmer, then the Players, and then they got to swing into Texas for a minute, and then back for Augusta, which is, I believe, the 9th through the 12th this year, the Masters. Nothing like it. So, and the NCAA tournament, wide open this year, too. So we got a lot to talk about there. So we got 2 more shows to get into. Obviously, we'll get into a lot of football. We'll be with you at 5 o'clock tomorrow on radio.com. In just minutes, we'll be joined by the fan. We're back after this. Goodell has had it in his mind for years. He's wanted to expand this regular season. We know that, okay? And he's got an issue on his hands with the preseason, which he knows. I have been a big proponent of this for a very long time. Even before Goodell started talking about it, I was talking about it for years, that I wanted them to expand and go to back the season up, play an extra game, and play the Super Bowl on President's Weekend. Okay, I thought, first of all, that the day after the Super Bowl is the biggest absentee day in the year in American industry. So it makes plenty of sense from that standpoint. Just like a lot of people have talked about playing the Super Bowl on Saturday night. They're never going to play the Super Bowl on Saturday night. Saturday night's not a good TV night. They don't want that. They want it on Sunday night, which is a family night. They want it on Sunday. The Oscars are still on Sunday night. Super Bowl will be on Sunday night. It's still the best TV night because everyone's home. You'll never get everyone to stay home on Saturday night, so they will not do that. But it serves the same purpose. You have a day off the next day. Um, the players, as I've heard from owners and heard from different people, have been adamant about how they do not want any more games. And since that is something they can collectively bargain for, they have really drawn the line in the sand. I think the Players Association, which has usually been really dumb in the collective bargaining negotiations with management, they have been taken to the woodshed so many times. They have not been represented well. They have not been smart. So I think they would like to win one, but I think what they should do is really look to set their group up with what they want in terms of health benefits, in terms of pension, in terms of everything they want, and play the carrot that they have. Play play their hand where they have the one nugget they have that the owners desperately want, and that is these extra games. That's the model, especially with what's going to happen in gambling. We all know what that's going to produce. Maybe you saw the Barron's study this weekend about what kind of money we're talking about. I mean, the money is going to be astronomical. The league's going to be involved in that in a very big way. It's between streaming and gambling in terms of mobile gambling on your phone. Those two things are going to escalate the revenues for these sports leagues, especially the NFL, dramatically. There's no question about it. It is happening. Now, I think this is a time for the NFL Player Association to be smart and to utilize what they do have in terms of chips and get everything they want by going the extra mile and being progressive here. 17 games is not perfect. 18 games, which is a non-starter with the players, and the player owners don't even think they can go there, is what they should be offering. But they should be willing to go 18 games, but they should want some automatic things in return. Number one, they get preseason basically melted down to exactly what they want. There are no preseason games anymore. There's glorified scrimmages, controlled scrimmages. There's no preseason games. There's no attendance for preseason games. If people want to come to the games, fine. I mean, it's like going to an NFL practice now. It's not like going to a game anymore. The days of the preseason games, the networks don't want them. Nobody wants them. Nobody wants to televise them. There's too much pressure for the players to play in the game, and they don't want to play in the games. So we all know that's coming to an end. That's not how you're going to prepare your teams anymore. You're going to prepare them in these controlled scrimmages. That's it. So you play 18 games, but over 20 weeks. So instead of playing 17 weeks with one bye, play 18 games with two byes. The season now is 20 official weeks long, and you play 18 games over the 20 weeks. You get everything you want. You get pensions at the age you want. You get health care like you've never dreamed of. You get participation. You get them to carve out extra money at the top. Just like they carve out money for themselves, they carve out money for you at the top that goes to the Players Association right off the top every year. But give them the 18 games over 20 weeks and let them remodel the sport for good. They will do the following things. They will completely retool preseason. You won't know it, but that's fine. Number two, you'll have more playoff teams in the playoffs. You'll have an extra round of playoffs, which will also create another bunch of money that which you take as the players, a 50-50 split of that next round of revenue. No owners get the playoff revenue. On this round, which we're helping you create by going 18 over 20, we're taking a 50-50 split on this extra round of revenue. Right to the top. Right to our bottom line. We get it right off the top. Just like they take their first billion off the top, you take right off the top. So you get everything you want, and you wind up getting more rest because now you don't have anything to fool with in preseason. Number two, you get the time off you want as far as what is mandatory, what is not mandatory in the year leading up, whether you're talking about OTAs, whether you're talking about weight training, whether you're talking about minicamp, if you're talking about the preseason, you negotiate whatever you think you need in that area in terms of safety, in terms of player freedom. Even create more player movement if you want, if you think that's going to help you with your salaries. Now's the time to do it. But give them what they want. Give them 18 games over 20 weeks. Let them move the schedule down a little bit in September. Let it finish on President's Weekend. You play 9 times in 10 weeks in the first half of the season. You play 9 times in 10 weeks over the second half of the season. So you actually get more rest. And realize if you're a playoff team, you can add in another week of rest when you get a bye. There'll actually be more byes into the first round of the playoffs, so that'll be weeks where you've clinched and you don't have to play that last week of the season. So there's that added incentive. And you get everything you want in terms of incentive, in terms of health care, in terms of pension. When pensions start, how much pension is, when you can take pension, everything else. Every way you modernize it that makes sense for your rank and file. Care for families that have players that die young and show any incidents of CTE, there's a certain number that's paid out to that family so that you know as a player that if you gave your life to this sport and you leave behind a family and you have an incidence of CTE, well, you automatically get a check from this league. And your family gets a check from this league for the rest of their lives. This league can afford that. If you're going to take the risk and do that, that should be there for you. Now remember, CTE right now cannot even be declared until somebody's dead, because it can only be found afterwards. They don't have a test for it on a living person. But this is the time for the league to show, for the Player Association to show leadership. There are revenue streams that are going to be available to this league, which they know they are going to stick their little greedy hands in the near future, that are going to be enormous. The models that show what happens when New York State comes online for online gambling are off the charts, and what streaming will produce in terms of revenue in the years to come. So get ahead of that. Become bigger partners in all of that. And right now you have the chip. The players hold the key because the owners can't get what they want here. They can't modernize the schedule and drag it into the new century unless the players play ball, because this is considered to be part of their working conditions. So it has to be collectively bargained. So if you're the players, don't give in for a couple of bucks and get the 17th game. Go all the way. Give them what they really want. Give them 18 games. Declare it over 20 weeks. Get yourself an extra bye and do away with preseason, which you can't stand anyway. Add around the playoffs, of which you get splits off the top on revenue. That's revenue you usually don't touch, the playoff revenue. Get involved in that. Where this next new round created, you get a 50-50 bit of that thrown into the Players Association pot. And make sure the players are taken care of who do show that they gave the ultimate, where they did give their livelihood and their lives to the sport. When they do leave tragically and it's found out that they have incidents of CTE, make sure that it's an automatic where the league has to pay when that happens. That should be a no-brainer. So if you are involved in the hierarchy of this league right now, this is a great opportunity for you because the league has something you want. Negotiate smartly. That's what a smart player association does. It uses their chips to their advantage. Back after this. You know, it looks now like, and you always think about it because, again, the Giants are right in the middle of things this year as far as that, and people could be trading up. Justin Herbert probably moved himself into the top 10 as far as the quarterbacks go. So that means 3 quarterbacks go off the board in the first 10 picks. And there's always going to be guys looking to move in there and take a quarterback. Not that the Giants are in the market for one. Of course they aren't. But the point is they could trade down a couple of slots, get themselves an extra pick, and still get the guy they want because there's some players there that are going to be available. Burrow's going off the board first. Young's going off the board second. And I could tell you, I will be stunned if Tua doesn't go off the board by 5. I think he will. I think either Miami will take him at 5 or somebody will trade up at 5 or 4, either ahead of the Dolphins or make a deal with the Dolphins and then take him. Somebody will trade up and will not let him get through the first 5 picks. I understand his durability issues. I understand the hip injury. I understand all the injuries. He's just too good a prospect. So you have now pretty much 3 quarterbacks guaranteed top 10. And then there's enough good players in there to make the rest interesting. And a couple of guys that are really interesting. The kid from Clemson's very interesting, obviously, Simmons. And I love Jerry Jeudy from Alabama. Love him. I mean, I think he's going to have a sensational, a sensational career in the NFL. I think he's going to be a tremendously productive player. And I would have no problem taking him in the top 5. I think he's that good a player. I think this year he could get squeezed out because of the defensive guys, the pass rushers, and the linemen that are there. And that just means that the value falls down a little bit. So he'd be a player I would be very, very interested in. And I'll tell you something. With Tua, I would be, if I had a team that I had an aging quarterback, that I had a year left on him, if I were, and I don't know what's going to happen with Brady and the Pats. I don't know what's going to happen with Breeze. If I'm the Chargers, and I would be very interested, and I needed a new star. If I'm them, I would be interested in. And Rivers is obviously gone. I would absolutely take Tua. I wouldn't even think about it. Now. The problem with him is they need a ready-made guy now, and he's not ready-made. So he'd be better off of a team trading in that gives him a chance to take next year off and just go about his business, get healthy, get into an NFL regimen, get conditioned by NFL people, get into NFL care, NFL nutrition, everything else, get all that taken care of, and go the route, that Tom Brady went. Because think about it, Tom Brady goes in, all he does the first year is build up his body and start throwing the ball a million times, learn how to throw the ball properly, learn how to get his body to a certain level, and the rest is history once he got his opportunity. You don't have to get your opportunity the first year, especially with a good team, especially with a good coach. So if you wind up in Green Bay behind Rodgers, you wind up in New Orleans, you wind up in New England if Brady goes back there, you wind up in a place like that, I think that it could turn out and pay incredible dividends for him and for the team, because a year later or even 2 years later, you might have yourself a legitimate, superstar quarterback who's now ready for action, ready to take a hit, ready to last, redone his body. I've told you many times that, Doc, look at Tom Brady's been in this league 20 years. because he learned how to take care of himself. He learned about nutrition. He was the hardest working guy in the world. Dr. O'Brien did who you heard with me a million times. He did the physicals for the quarterbacks at the draft, and he was a quarterback at Harvard. And he told me that the worst specimen he ever examined was Tom Brady. He said it was the worst bodied quarterback he'd ever seen. So think about that. And he's lasted 20 years, and he's an immortal. So it shows you it can be done. So when you come in now and you got somebody, and I bring this up because I was watching someone who said, oh, you know what, I'd never take a risk on this he's never going to stay healthy. He's never going to play in this league. And I'm saying, you don't know that. I understand there's a risk. He has been injury prone. He has had both ankle problems. He's had a knee problem. Now he's got a hip problem. He also put up numbers that were every bit as good as the numbers Burrow put up. Now, Burrow's numbers are considered to be the best ever put up in the history of college football. Tua's numbers are almost exactly as good. That's how talented this kid is. He is one of the most accurate passes I've ever seen in college. The question is, can he get to a point where he's durable enough to take a pounding? And it's a legitimate question. So if he's put in the right place with the right people who know how to teach him what has to be done in terms of nutrition and body type and, exercise and all the things he has to do, you could rebuild the physical things that have to be rebuilt and then let the other stuff just take care of itself. The fact that he is an incredibly gifted athlete with a tremendous arm and an incredible touch and accuracy, which is what he brings to the table. Remember, all this kid did in his career was step into the championship game at halftime down and win a championship. That was his first game. And he really hasn't been healthy since. When he was like 28 touchdowns and 1 intercept when he got hurt the first time, and he's been hurt ever since. He's never been healthy again on the field since. And he still put up insane numbers when he's healthy. So I think he makes the draft very interesting. And I think it'll be very hard for the Giants not to get a very, very good player, either an offensive lineman who they love, who I doubt it, because I'm not sure there's one that is worthy of being taken that high. And I do think there's 2 or 3 defensive players on the line, either edge or on the line, who are worthy of being taken as high as the Giants pick. And so they are going to have their pick of a couple of them. And I think they clearly need one of those. That's clearly what they need to start. They need an anchor on the offensive line still, and they need pass rushers. And with that, they can move up. The two teams that I think will, I'm not counting the Steelers, because if the Steelers with their defense put Roethlisberger back next year and he's Roethlisberger, they're going to be good. I don't think there's any question about that. The 2 teams that I think who are going to turn it around the quickest for next year based on what they have and what they can add are Atlanta, which, remember, late in the season this year, beat San Francisco and beat New Orleans. And the other is Detroit, which played without Stafford and led in almost every game they played this year. Twice had the Packers beat, let them off the hook. I think they led in 15 of the 16 games this year, and didn't win any of them. So I think they aren't that far apart. It's not that far for them to go personnel-wise, where if they make a couple of good moves, those 2 teams, I think they reverse things very quickly. I think the Giants have some players that are interesting, but their infrastructure, as you're seeing here what it means with the Niners. The Niners went and built the infrastructure. They built the offensive line. They built the defensive line. They went and traded for the quarterback. That's how they did this. The Giants don't have infrastructure. Until they build both lines to a level where they can be highly competitive, if not even better than that, they're not going to be back. That's what has to start to happen. And they have some skilled people. We know that, especially if the tight end stays healthy, which I don't know if he will. He might be one of those players that never does. But they came up with a wide receiver last year as a mid-round pick who did a nice job. Their quarterback is capable. He just has to stop turning the ball over. They obviously have a wonderful back. They need infrastructure in the worst way. Plus, they need a culture that has been lacking. They need a leader. They need a coach who can lead. And we'll see if this guy can. I don't know if he can or he can't. We're going to find out. But they desperately are in need of a leader because that's been sorely missing for them for so long. Tomorrow and Friday, we'll obviously turn our attention completely to Super Bowl 54. We'll do that starting at 5 on radio.com and then obviously at 6 on The Fan. 2 more shows before we finally decide this football season in what should be, I think, one of the really entertaining games. I don't think this is a game you got to sell. I think there's so many storylines. I think there's so many outstanding performers. I think there's very interesting and differing things that these two offenses bring to the table that is going to present big problems for both respective defenses. Obviously, the saga of Andy Reid. You have Mahomes on the doorstep of superstardom. You have Bosa. You have Sherman. You have obviously all the skilled people, the 2 crazy tight ends who are both loons and both very, very talented, all pro types. Which one of them is more important this weekend? Might surprise you. Everyone might say Kelsey. That might not be the case. So 2 guys who both have an ability to be very special performers on, and both are goofballs, let's be honest. So there's a lot to really dig into in this game, and we will do that the next couple of days. So we will see you tomorrow at 5 on radio.com, 6 on The Fan. Enjoy your Wednesday night, everybody.